we are now presented with an opportunity for a second takeoff. Malaysia has a second chance because the world has now changed. The course of the world has changed altogether compared to the last 25 years. During the last period, the world was competing on cost and economic efficiency. But now the world cares about resilience and economic security. Malaysia has a second chance also because the unity government under Prime Minister Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim is determined to bring about Malaysia's renaissance. At the core of the second takeoff is precisely how Malaysia can transform itself from a land and resource-based economy to an economy that is based upon technology. This is a challenge captured by today's theme. It is not the first time that Johor is trying to grow with global shift and new technology development. The modern Johor Sultanate was founded upon global shift, founded upon the coming about of steamship and steam-powered mobility. Think about this. 170 years ago, 180 years ago, because of steamship, the world became closer. The world became closer, and therefore, the founding of Johor Bahru came about, coincided with the advent of steamships, which shortened the time needed to move commercial cargo, thus making Europe-oriented export-led commercial plantation the main economic activities in Johor Bahru then, a highly profitable venture. So it is also not the first time that a regional plan is being devised. Tyler's mentioned about why now. It wasn't because we have never thought about that. There was something called the idea of Sijori back in the early 90s, and there was also Iskandar region that was launched in 2006. But the Iskandar development ended up as a property play without sufficient emphasis on creating better jobs with better pay and better life for Johorians. The plan at the time was to attract the richer strata of Singaporeans to come, stay, play, and study in the Iskandar region. There wasn't enough emphasis on building technology and innovation in Johor. Now, very few nations and cities have a second chance. Now that we have a second chance, we must do it well. At a deeper level, Malaysia as a nation needs to celebrate the rise of secondary cities and regions. Since independence in 1957, Malaysia has been a polity that has been too centralized. I'm speaking of this as a federal minister, deputy minister, but I think we need a new way of looking at federal and state relationship, and we need a new way of looking at secondary cities or second cities. Now, if we are successful in creating Johor, Singapore's special economic zone, the gauge of success, what success means? Success means that if over the next couple of years, or maybe in a decade time, in 2 decades time, we look back, Johor Bahru becomes, or the greater Johor Bahru becomes known to every one of us, known to the world, and known to people who make decisions as the second economic capital of Malaysia, then I think we can say that we are successful. What do I mean by second economic capital? Look at Osaka to Japan. Look at Melbourne to Australia. Look at Busan to Korea. If Greater Johor Bahru in 5, 10, 15 years' time means to you, people in this room, as the second economic capital, then I think we are quite successful. Imagine that the Klang Valley, the Greater Johor Bahru, the Penang Kulim conurbation, as the 3 main engines firing at once, coupled with the resource-rich Kuantan and the East Coast, Sarawak and Sabah, each acting as a catalyst, Malaysia's growth will multiply. Therefore, for the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone to succeed, We need a paradigm shift to celebrate the Greater Johor Bahru as the second economic capital of the nation. The Johor SEZ is being proposed in the context of a much larger global shift. During the hyper-globalization period, China was a factory for the world, and Singapore was one of the world's financial centers. Between China and Singapore, there wasn't much other places that was needed, including Malaysia. Because China was so efficient and low cost then as a factory, or factory of the world, the rest of the world experienced premature deindustrialization, including Malaysia. Now that the world is restructuring supply chains, we are at the start of a new period. Perhaps the next 20 or 30 years will be a similar trajectory which will see the world having more than one supply chain. Maybe there'll be one US supply chain, there'll be one China supply chain, there'll be another supply chain that is open in the middle ground with Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, maybe Brazil, maybe some of the potential future African economy. And that probably will be the structure of the world. And which is why by then, or even now, regional production networks become very important. In this new world that we are being thrown into reluctantly, the sooner we embrace each other to form strong regions that are sticky, coherent, and collaborative, the better our shared future would be. It is in such a context that the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone should envisage itself as a mini common market between Johor and Singapore, with the possibility of extending it to the Real Islands, realizing the Sijori ideas which was mooted a generation ago. I was just reminded this morning by Faiz of Johor Plantation. Coincidentally, Menteri Besar of Johor just visited the Real Island and came with a very similar idea that we should imagine Johor, Singapore, and Batam eventually as one single regional production network. Let me briefly touch on what all this entails on the ground. The Johor-Singapore SEZ has only 3 key issues to solve. That's from my view. I must say that I speak for myself and not representing any agencies. I think there are 3 major issues to deal with, actually not so complicated. The first is the movement of people and goods. The second is where exactly is the SEZ. And the third is incentive. If we can solve these 3 problems, I would say that we are quite successful. The question of movement of people and goods, I would say that we should be ambitious. We now have the causeway, we have the second link, we are going to have RTS, we still have the Tebrau Shuttle. We should be envisaging ferries from Puteri Harbour to Singapore, ferry from Forest City to Singapore. Coincidentally, these 2 places are within my parliamentary constituency. And perhaps ferry from Pasir Gudang to Changi, and we should envisage and be prepared to think about more linkages in order to make traffic and mobility a lot more smoother. And as far as immigration is concerned, we should make it very smooth, seamless transport for at least the frequent travelers. As far as the question of where, Menteri Besar of Johor, Dato' Onn Hafiz has been very clear. The hope or aspiration or the view of the Johor government is to have it within the entire Iskandar region and Pengerang. Now we have dealt with 2 questions. The third question is incentive. On 12th of May, I spoke at the Johor State Assembly as an assemblyman, and I suggested that we should look at incentive in a very different way. If we have a huge area, then we must be very targeted and restrictive as far as incentive is concerned. And I suggested that we should look at incentive in 4 different ways with a new way of looking at things. The first, incentive for Malaysian workers returning to work in selected critical areas. A second, which I think perhaps this is relevant and important to our conversation about supply chain-based incentive, especially for Malaysian companies that contribute to a strong ecosystem and a resilient supply chain. We'll need clear technological roadmaps for the SEZ so that we understand the gaps in the supply chain. Otherwise, we will only be attracting firms, or we will only have disjointed supply chain. And this is relevant to Johor, to Malaysia, and to Singapore. We do not want to just have firms, and we do not want to have only disjointed supply chain. We want to be able to build supply chain resilience, and when we want to build supply chain resilience, we must be able to have a clear technological roadmap on what we want to build and what sort of supply chain we want to have. A third incentive I suggested was incentive for control towers, such as regional headquarters, Center of Excellence, and R&D Center. And the fourth incentive I suggested is incentive for the state government. Now, this is hopefully a bit new to the conversation. Instead of thinking of incentive for casting a wide net for various companies, we should think of how to incentivize the state government so that the state shares some proceeds from corporate income tax collection from within Johor, from within the SEZ, so that the state government has a lot more resources to cater for better infrastructure in the SEZ area. And this hopefully will help to transform the federal-state relationship in the long run. Ultimately, how we position the SEZ has a lot to do with how we position Malaysia. In a rather simplistic way, we do not see Malaysia as competing with Vietnam, or we do not want investors to conceive Malaysia as a Vietnam plus. For the Johor SEZ to succeed, we would like to see Johor complementing Singapore's supply chain and as a Singapore at a discount. Again, thank you to JCorp for making this possible, and I wish you a great conference ahead. And I hope that together we can brainstorm and think of fresh ideas so that the Johor SEZ is not just a new idea for Malaysia and Singapore, but an idea that will work, an idea that will actually take root and help change the national conversation and not just the Johor conversation. Thank you.